And about that time too is when Brandon called. And I tell everybody this, Robert. I tell everybody I shouldn't be where I'm at today. Um, a lot of people say it, and I'm not saying they don't mean it, but and it's overused. But it is God's plan. It was God's way. I got a call from a guy who was listening to our podcast. Ryan called, and they had lost their play-by-play voice. This is back in 2012 for Brandon, and always had an affinity for play-by-play, and listen to guys like Jack Crystal and David Kellum, and I mean, all these guys that are just so good on the air. Said, don't know you from Adam. We're desperate. He said, I really don't even particularly like your takes on your show. He said, because I'm an Ole Miss guy. He said, but I like your voice. He said, you have good delivery. He said, would you want to? He said, have you ever done play by play? I said, I've done it a million times in my head. I've
Right.
done it
Yep.
messing around. I said, but I'd love the opportunity. And he said, we'll give you an on-site interview of sorts. And if it's great, good. And if it's not, no harm, no foul. We'll go our separate ways. And a guy told me, he said, hey, one thing you want to watch is that 10th grade quarterback. His name's Gardner Minshew. Make sure you watch that kid. He's got a chance to be pretty good.
So I'm here with one of my favorite people, kind of in central Mississippi. I guess I'd say in all of Mississippi is Jake Wimberly, who has really an awesome story of how he's come from a lover of sports to now the guy, the voice, just the voice of sports. But the coolest thing that I love most of all is that this definitely wasn't your destination, or so you thought, but here you are. And so I kind of want to jump into that. I guess, kind of rolling into coming out of high school, you want to do something, you go to Mississippi State and all. How are you even introduced to this media stuff?
Yeah, and thank you for having me, Robert. I appreciate that. So if you go back to high school, and that's quite a while from now, a while back in the calendar, so to speak, now with the gray hair that I have, I actually want to be a football coach.
Okay.
And, played football, was a very average athlete, captain down at Florence. We were not great. We never played in one playoff game my time at Florence. So we were always a very mediocre to below average football team, but always wanted to play football, always wanted to be a football coach, and had some coaches kind of talk me out of it, out of the business, just because of some negativity that was in it at the time. My parents were not a big fan of coaching at the time. And, my parents never went to college. And so, they were kind of financing. I was a very average student. This is a true story, true story. I don't mind telling this. I made a 14 as the highest I ever made on ACT.
Okay.
And I mean, literally at 14. So I had to take all remedial classes in college. And so, and there's a part of that in this story as well. My parents pushed me towards more of, professionalism and, something to do. My father was in construction, so we chose engineering. And, when I got into college, I went to Hines Community College, had to take all remedial courses because my test scores were so low. Took those courses, and I remember the first time I ever took Calculus 1, the professor pulled me aside and said, Mr. Wimberly, I need to speak with you after class. And walked in there, and he said, I know you probably know this, but you have the lowest ACT score in this class. And I said, I know. He said, no, are you sure you want to keep doing this? And I said, yes, I do. So, I taught myself how to study because I really wasn't, I mean, again, I wasn't a bad student in high school. I just wasn't a great student. So taught myself how to study. I made an A in Calculus 1 and an A in Calculus 2, struggled a little bit with physics, went to Mississippi State. And, when I was at Mississippi State, there was a time in my life at Mississippi State where I thought, okay, I don't know that I really want to do this. And I thought about coaching again. And I made a call home. I had it set up. I was going to be an undergraduate assistant on Jackie Sherrill's staff. I had called a couple of my football coaching friends, and they were helping me out with this. I called my father, and he said, hey, look, if you switch, you're on your own. So it scared the daylights out of me. I decided not to do it. I stayed in engineering. When I got out, and always loved the engineering profession. And don't get me wrong, the engineering profession was good to me. Met a lot of great people. It taught me a lot. I've always said this. I think being in higher mathematics and being in higher physics and when you get into that kind of stuff, it does help you think a little differently. Now, that doesn't mean that you're, thinking better than everybody else. I just think it makes you think differently, when you start dealing with abstract type of stuff. But, went through engineering, did some stuff because always stayed involved in sports. And then, back about 2005 or 2006, I was married to a young lady. We're obviously no longer married now, but her father was real sick. They lived in Macomb, and she asked me, she said, we were going back and forth, and she was a sports girl. I was a sports guy, and, just loved sports. We had coached some softball together. She said, hey, there's a spot for a stringer in a South Mississippi newspaper. We're going back to see Dad every weekend. I know you're bored. Maybe you could do that on the weekends, and that would give you something to do to kind of break up the time. So I applied and got it, and then had a really good guy that was the kind of the editor in chief of that newspaper down there in South Mississippi. Taught me how to write, sports articles. Kind of the technique of the sport, how to write, on something like that. So I started covering Park Lane Academy and Centerville Academy on Friday nights, and was making $25 a game. Didn't care about the money, just wanted to be out and doing that. So did that for a couple of years. Centerville Academy, got a chance to meet and know Bill Hurst, who is one of the premier, legendary high school coaches in the state. Charlie Newland was at Macomb at Park Lane at the time. So I got a chance to meet those guys. Rocked along and did that for 2, 3, 4 years, and then a buddy of mine asked me. We were just joking one day, and he said, "Hey, we got to start a podcast." And it was he was an Ole Miss guy, I was a state guy, so we started a podcast, dabbling in podcasting, and then over time the podcast started to grab a reach and a following. And a lot of it was due to Twitter was new at the time. And I say new, it was 5, 6, 7 years old. Twitter was a different place back in 2010 than it is today. It was more of a, you could say what you wanted to do what you wanted to do. So we were a little edgy, grabbed some fans that way. But he and I ended up, not doing the podcast after a while. I was with a guy named Keith Jasper, V Sporto. It's no longer around. I don't know if some of your listeners, some followers may know, and you may remember the old Bulldog and Rebel Sports Radio. It was out years ago. So I was working with those guys on the side. And then I started a podcast on my own covering Mississippi State sports, and it was called Double Coverage. And about that time, too, is when Brandon called. And I tell everybody this, Robert, I tell everybody, I shouldn't be where I'm at today. A lot of people say it, and I'm not saying they don't mean it, but and it's overused, but it is God's plan. It was God's way. I got a call from a guy who was listening to our podcast, and he was an Ole Miss guy. His name was Ryan Herndon. I don't think Ryan would mind me telling you. You may know Ryan over there in Brandon. But Ryan called, and they had lost their play-by-play voice. This is back in 2012 for Brandon. And always had an affinity for radio, always had an affinity for play-by-play, and, listen to guys like Jack Crystal and David Kellum. And I mean, all these guys that are just so good on the air, and, kept a sports ball game or broadcast on my radio. It seemed like, and he called and he said, "Hey, look, we got 2 weeks to go until our season, and we had to let go of our play-by-play guy." Said, "Don't know you from Adam. We're desperate." He said, "I really don't even particularly like your takes on your show." He said, "Because I'm an Ole Miss guy." He said, "But I like your voice." He said, "You have good delivery." He said, "Would you want to?" He said, "Have you ever done play-by-play?" I said, "Honestly, I've never done play-by-play." I said, "I've done it a million times in my head, and
Right.
I've done it messing around." I said, "But I'd love the opportunity." And he said, "Why don't you come to Warren Central?" He said, "They've got the Red Carpet Bowl. Brandon's going to be playing." It was the 50th edition of the Red Carpet Bowl. He said, "We'll give you an on-site interview of sorts. And if it's great, good. And if it's not, no harm, no foul. We'll go our separate ways." And I'll never forget pulling up out there, and didn't know anything about Brandon other than it was Brandon. And I was trying to find some notes on Brandon. And then a guy told me, said, "Hey, one thing you want to watch is that 10th grade quarterback. His name's Gardner Minshew. Make sure you watch that kid. He's got a chance to be pretty good." And of course, the rest is history with Brandon. And so to kind of take you moving forward, I was working for the state of Mississippi for MDOT. Love MDOT. Love those people. Wonderful people still there that I talk to today. Some things had happened, and I was really moving and shaking in this. And I didn't know that this would ever become a career, but I started doing some, fill-in work for 105.9 The Zone. They had called, and I knew John Wiener, who was there, and some others. And I was doing some fill-in work for them. And so I started doing a show part-time when John left. John was had moved to Texas, or had moved to Colorado and then Texas. There was a slot open, so I started doing, what they called the drive at 5 to 6. I'd go to MDOT. I would go in and do that show in the afternoons. I'd come in early. And then things just happened. I went through a divorce, was looking for a second lease on life. And then the general manager called and said, "Hey, we'd love to offer you a position full time." And kind of the rest is history at that point.
So I want to jump into getting into that and taking that leap. But first, I want to go back to you in the civil engineering world. So I just finished reading The Boys in the Boat. I'm like 10 years late to this game. It was a great movie. My superintendent gave me the book and said, "I think you'll like this." most, if not all, of the nine guys on that boat that went to the Olympics in Berlin, they were all engineering majors. So they used a lot of what they learned in the perseverance of such difficult classes, and they're all working class guys. And they said that a lot of what they knew as working class individuals, and then also as engineering students, really kind of paid off and spilled over into them in the boat. So I would ask, is there anything on that side of your life that spilled over and that you would say is beneficial into who you are now?
1000%. And I'll tell you exactly where the biggest part that it helps me, and then this, and to a smaller degree. All right, so it's no secret, and I think there's Pew reviews out here that show the the least trusted individual in society is a politician. The second least trusted person in society is going to be somebody in the media, and the third least trusted is a sales rep of any kind of salesman. And I bring that up is because for who I work for and what I do, yes, I do the radio stuff and all of that's great and wonderful, but the other side of that is I'm a account executive for now Connoisseur Media, formerly Alpha Media, and that's what I was partly of what I was hired to do is to, generate revenue through sales and marketing for our company. And I bring that up is because there are a lot of salesy people out there. There's a lot of great people in the business, but there's a lot of salesy people that promise you the world. I When I came over to Alpha Media, and it just happened to be about the time it was 2017, 2018. Media companies were really, radio and TV kind of merged. And what I mean by they merged is they became multimedia conglomerates. And they had to because not everybody's buying traditional TV anymore. Not everybody's buying traditional newspaper, for their marketing anymore. Not everybody's buying traditional radio. There's people that are still buying that. But we became a full-blown multimedia company. And when that happened, I started really looking at the digital sales element, websites, SEO, SEM, Google, all the stuff that has analytics to it. And that really drew me to it just coming from the engineering background because I thought, okay, wow, this is kind of cool. Like we can sell some things and give people products where we can have some tangible assets to them. And I understood, obviously, spreadsheets and analytics and pie charts and all that stuff, because that's all, the engineering world, how we kind of communicate, X, Y, and Z. And I thought we can do this here. So I took an engineering approach to sales more so of, hey, I'm not going to try to sell you and I can't promise you $1, but let me show you how we can white glove service your business. And we're going to show you how this works, why it works. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to pivot based on data and based on analytics. And we're going to try to keep your business moving in the right direction. So there's no doubt, and I think my general manager would tell you this, my approach to sales is a little different than a lot of people. It comes more from an engineering background. It comes more from a, hey, we're going to run beta tests. I mean, when I go into meetings, I don't even take sales decks. I mean, it's more, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your business. So yes, 1000%. A different approach, bringing one business model to another. The second is analytics in sports. So I, created a college football, what I call the Hourglass, kind of a cheesy name, just my version of college football analytics to predict and project games, not just Vegas type style, but just simple wins and losses models. And then I've also done that for high school this year as well. So there's definitely a lot in the engineering world that has spilled over into this for me.
That's one of the things that I wish I could go back. I've got 2 degrees in English and 1 degree in marketing communications, and I'd say, I laugh. I never took calculus. I was an honor student and all that, but I never took calculus. The last real math class I took was elementary statistics back in 2004, maybe. So I mean, I didn't have any real math, but if I'd have known the stories that you can tell with statistics, I'd have jumped all over that. I think, especially now, I see it in schools and all, but I also see it inside the marketplaces. Statistics are telling the stories that people want to know. And then one of the things that you kind of mentioned and touched on is that you're building relationships. Relationships is where it's at. And then you kind of merge that together with your Jake Wimberly, the voice, because I hear your voice in the mornings when I get ready. I have my little Bluetooth speaker, and all of a sudden I think, do I need a new refrigerator from Cowboy Maloney's? I need to go in there. Jake Wimberly has told me to do that. How did you get into to say let me be the voice to kind of do that? Is it merging kind of all of the things that are there? You've already got a foot in the door with your voice on the radio, but then also are those your accounts?
Great question. When I got to Alpha, formerly Alpha Media, I said, because things worked a little slower than I wanted them to work. And what I mean is this is, all right, so let's say I go out and you had a business and then I closed your account and you were going to be buying radio commercials for whatever radio station that we have. We have six in the cluster that we have here, 105.9 or WJMI or Kicks here, wherever it is. So what would happen is I'd say, hey, I need somebody to voice this commercial, and then there would be nobody there. Well, it's going to take 2 days because this person's out or whatever. So there was a guy, rest in peace to Roger Lamb. He was an amazing guy that worked at Alpha Media. He came over from Miss 103, lifer in this business, but very techie. He taught me how to, really cut commercials and taught me how to use software. And, because I was just, like a sponge. I wanted to learn all of it. I said, I don't want to have to be dependent on anybody. So I, there is something and I would probably cringe if I went back and listened to myself 10, 15 years ago on any kind of podcast, but there is something to finding your voice, to, your voice to be different from a normal voice to a radio voice, and not to sound, cheesy or anything, but there is a different, and you do this long enough, you find yourself in that radio voice all day long. But I figured out, okay, I've kind of got a niche at this. I can do this. So I started voicing commercials for clients and said, hey, we can voice it. See if you like this. Oh yes, I love it. Let's run with it. And it started so going down that road. And then of course there was a part of our company called Voice Hub. They started getting me voicing stuff. I had people started calling me asking me, hey, could you voice this for us? Could you voice that for us? So really kind of created just an avenue of just for voice work. I've done voice prompts. I've done for companies. I've voiced, all the pre-recordings you hear on a lot of stuff. So with my accounts, what happens a lot of times is they'll say, hey, we want you to voice it. And I always tell people, hey, we would love for you to voice it, because you don't want to have too much of the same voice anywhere. Right. It gets a little mundane. But like with Cowboy Maloney's, for instance, they're a great client of mine. We run a lot of stuff with them. We have now AI technology that we use to help them cut their television commercials, also commercials on social media, streaming television. So we make it pretty easy when they come in. Now officially become Johnny's voice for a lot of this. So that tends to happen with a lot of our accounts. But it just kind of happened over time, just because I wanted to make sure that I could take care of my people and not have to depend on voice work people. I said, hey, let me see if I can do this myself.
Yeah, I remember my 2 years at the Clarion Ledger back before everything imploded and everybody else had to go get, other jobs. We talked a lot about being journalists in a backpack, and can you do everything? Can you shoot video? Can you shoot photo? Can you edit? Can you write? Can you publish? If you can do it all, then you've given yourself an opportunity to where now you can move forward and you become an asset. Through all of this, going from the engineering world and getting the opportunity to call play by play kind of fall in your lap and something that you love, what have you learned? What kind of lessons have you learned through this?
That I was probably brought into this. Let's go back to my want to be a football coach as a child, as a young man. And then that never happened. And then you come full circle, and then now all of a sudden I'm involved with everything and on a different side of the fence. I've been able to broker relationships with the MHSAA, and this is not me embellishing. This is me getting to a point here. Guys like Judd Boswell that well, guys like Toby Collins, coaches around the state. I've learned it's about people, and God put me in this situation, and I mean this sincerely, to try to make a difference in people's lives. Now, does that mean my takes on Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin tomorrow changes people's lives? No. But the things we do with charity, the things we do with, just to the relationships, the kids that, I've had so many kids over the years now reach out to me and say, hey, thank you for, this kind word, or thank you for this, what this interview you did with us, or a parent, because a lot of things that we do, a lot of times parents will call and say, hey, we need some advice and we would just love your advice on, and other people's as well, but my kid's trying to play junior college football, or my kid's trying to do this, and where can I go to get help at, this school or that school? And I think it's just about people. And that's the big thing for me, is to be a part of something. And I, we run an internship program through our company now that I created about 5 years ago. And we get students from Mississippi College and Jackson State, and then we get some of the summer from Ole Miss and Mississippi State and some others. And I tell all of our people, especially that want to be on radio or TV, is that, you know, when you do a ball game, it's not about you. A lot of people think they do it and they think, okay, I've got that microphone is crack. I mean, they want to hear me talk. Well, you're a storyteller, and that's the way I look at it. Is anytime you're a play-by-play voice for Brandon or Clinton or the New York Giants or whatever, you're really telling a story. So I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, it's about the people that we reach, the relationships that we've created, and just to be involved and to try to be a positive influence in people's lives.
So going to Brandon and being that play by play guy, you know, you've been there for, I don't know what, a good decade, almost, yeah, 15 years, decade and a half. You've gotten to see a lot of amazing players, a lot of, you know, the Jonathan Mingos and the Garner Minshew's and all these names that we now get to see either on Saturdays and Sundays. What stands out from that? Like if you had like two or three things that you say, hey, these that I pull from these past 15 years, these are those things that stand out from doing play by play for Brandon.
You're talking just from a sports standpoint?
Yeah, just anything. I mean, even and then, you know, after this we can kind of talk about how Brandon handled things this year. But yeah, from a sports standout, what have you seen player wise and team wise that really stands out to you to say, I got to be part of that over the last 15 years?
No, that's a great question. Minshew is definitely number one. Just because he was there when I started, and you know, Gardner is a very interesting guy. And his father, actually, we just moved in a house. His father just built my house that we moved into. So he's a home builder and does a lot of stuff. And so I have immense respect for that family and for Gardner and for Flint, his dad, and his mom. And you know, Gardner's a guy that nobody really believed in. And you know, I was writing during the time. With Chris Brooks for Mississippi Gridiron and for some other people, just some kind of freelance type stuff. And I would always throw some stuff out about Gardner. And that really, I think, meant the world to him because there was a lot of people that didn't believe in him. If you go back and look at his recruitment, Mississippi State wasn't interested in him at the time. Hugh Freeze was there. They ran a different type of offense. They had Chad Kelly and they had some other quarterbacks. Dan Mullen was honest, and the Minshews will tell you this. He was probably the most honest. He's like, hey, we want a 6'2", 250 guy, you know, Chris Ralph, Dak Prescott that can run the football first. So in Southern Miss, which was kind of an anomaly, didn't want him either. So just to see his story, and you know, this is, if I ever write a book, this will be part of it in the book is, and I've told this a little bit, is Gardner came in with and did some radio with me back when he was at East Carolina, and he was one of the first guys, and not the first, but one of the first early guys in the transfer portal when people could try to transfer as a graduate, senior graduate. And he came in and was doing he was committed to Alabama, and he was going to be the backup quarterback to Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts when they were there. So Gardner sat in and did some radio with me, and I walked him out of the building, and I told him, hey, man, look, if I can ever help you, let me know. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, you can help me. And I said, well, what you need? He said, so don't put this out there. He's like, I haven't even told Coach Saban this. He said, I'm not done playing football, and I don't want to go to Alabama. He said, it's not because I don't want to like Alabama. He's like, I want to play. He's like, and Dad asked me to get you to do this. We're talking to several people, but I just want to hear your opinion too. He said, you do a lot of analytics. You do a lot of stuff with quarterbacks. He said, go through and tell me where you think 3 or 4 or 5 places I might could start next year and have opportunity. So ran some numbers, got back to him, and there was 3 or 4 spots, but Washington State stuck out, and it stuck out because sadly the quarterback there had committed suicide, Tyler Helinski, and there was nobody there. And I told him, I said, look, I called him, I said, if you don't mind going to the back end, top left corner of the country, and he wasn't dating anybody, I said, you know, that would be your spot. And I got a chance to really see a lot and be a part of his journey at Washington State, to Washington State, with how mummy he was here locally, went to the bowl game at the Alamo Bowl. So, went to his draft party. So Gardner's definitely number one. You know, when you look at some others, Will Rogers, obviously, who is now back, he was helping a little bit this year. Will's always been a fantastic story. And then, look, the Sam Williams run was an amazing run at Brandon. Sam is a good friend of mine and became really close to Sam while he was here. And just some really great players, really good community, and have had a chance to see that thing really kind of grow over the years. It's just they haven't been able to get that championship yet. So it's been fun.
Yeah, you hit the word right there. I mean, obviously you can tell it's community studio. The community there is something that we always notice. It's, in my professional life, the paying job of communications for the school district, I get to meet other people from other school districts, and we all might be a little bit different, but we're all kind of the same in the fact that it's about the kids and it's about the community, and it's so much fun to see how an entire city can come together for that Friday night, especially when it's a good team this year. So Clinton, we kind of went through our own little bit of uncertainty right at the very start of the season. Coach Morgan being named the head coach, and then some players leaving to go to private schools, and so it was kind of a big question of what is this year going to look like? Is this something that we can get behind? Is it worth our time going? And we might have not have made the playoffs because I always say that our district is the district of death. You have six teams that can make it, and only four can really go, or eight teams that can make it, and really you can only get four. So it really is a flip of the coin. But Brandon itself went through its own little bit of a distraction. This seems to be the year of distractions in football, thanks to everything going on. But Brandon had its own little bit of a distraction. But you saw them make their run all the way through South State under Coach Eugene Clinton, who I vividly remember as I was an eighth grader, ninth grader when he made the interception off the bobble that happened in the Egg Bowl. I never thought that I would hear that name again this far down the road, but I do remember him. He did a great job of kind of holding that team together, and that team did a great job of persevering through some of these distractions. Can you tell me a little bit about the resiliency that you saw in that team?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've known Eugene for my time since my time at Mississippi State. We were at Mississippi State together. And another part of this, which is another story for another day, Eugene and I played competitive flag football back in the early 2000s together. So I had a team and he played with us, and known Eugene for a long time. Super good guy, coached under or played under Willie Collins at Provine in the 90s, played under Jelly Dunn, as you referenced. Been at Brandon for about 10 years as a position coach, defensive backs coach, has done a wonderful job with those position units over the years. A lot of great defensive backs have come through. Some have gone on to play some big time college football. But I for whatever reason, when the whole Lance Pogue thing didn't work out, when they promoted Eugene to interim head coach, he really just brought in, I think, a different level of discipline. Not saying there wasn't discipline on that team, but really just brought discipline back, the way he felt like it needed to be, some structure that needed to be put in place, and the kids bought in, and it was a heck of a run. I mean, you talk about 3 days post Lance Poe going out, we go down to Oak Grove and lose the ball game 21-7. And that game was a little closer than that score indicated. But then this team was sitting at 3-5. Nobody thought they were even going to make the playoffs. Had to go to Pearl, won a close game in the Rankin County Super Bowl, came home and beat Meridian on senior night, went on the road to Ocean Springs. That was a major upset. The next week down to Oak Grove, again, another major upset. And then just kind of ran out of gas, ran into a buzzsaw there. Gulfport's got a really good football team and very well may win next Saturday in Starkville against Tupelo. That should be a great 7A ball game. But nonetheless, just you can't say enough about the job he was able to, do and to kind of pull these kids back in the middle of the road here.
It's kind of, you mentioned earlier getting into podcasts. You were an early podcaster. I love podcast. I haven't realized that I've been podcasting for about a decade, whether it be professionally with communications or just on my own. It's kind of been fun, and it kind of sneaks up on you that time can go by this quickly. So you got in pretty early and had some things there, but you've got something going on now a little bit with the Varsity Voices podcast. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's a really awesome concept.
Yeah, so I can't take total credit for this one. Jared Schatz, who's a good friend of mine, who is play-by-play voice for the Germantown Mavericks. We've been doing high school football stuff for quite a while. As a matter of fact, Jared had the rights to the MHSA championship games several years ago for the radio, but he didn't have a radio home. So he came to us and said, "Hey, we'd like to partner with you guys." Don Hinton at the time had told me, he was the executive director of the MHSA before Ricky Neves, we'd love to get the games on 105.9. It makes sense to have them here locally on Mississippi Sports Channel. We need to have that done. Jared and I were able to get together and come together on a deal to put those games on 105.9. And then we've taken that and gone from, football championships, baseball championships, basketball championships, and high school sports. So Jared came to me last year and he said, "Hey, we ought to expand this thing into podcasting. I know you've done some podcasting." And so we sat down and came up with a concept of just a once a week high school football podcast. Breck Riley, who's in Kosciuszko, Brandon Davis, who's in Vicksburg, just four of the guys that we all do a lot of these games together. Said, hey, let's just get together and have fun, and we'll recap, the week that was, and look at the week ahead, and because one of the things that you mentioned, you were at the Clarion Ledger, and you'll definitely understand this and appreciate this, is there's just not a lot, with the Clarion Ledger going away at the way it was. That was, I hated to see that. I don't want to call it a travesty, but it's close to a travesty, because look, I was a guy that grew up, and the first thing I did is I picked up the Clarion Ledger, and second thing I did is I went straight to the sports section, and then I read the rest of the paper all day long, every day. I mean, I was a Clarion Ledger guy. That went away. We know that the television networks now, the local, CBS and ABC and NBC, their sports coverage is now cut back to about 2.5 to 3 minutes per 30-minute cycle on news, because for whatever reason, news, it goes heavy on weather, and I get it, and then heavy on national politics, very little on local sports and such like that. So what you're seeing is in 2025 is there's not even though we've got the internet and Facebook and X and all this stuff, there's not a lot of local flavor on high school sports. That's why I started doing this high school football road tour at the summer a couple years ago. Coaches seem to like it. They want more coverage of the sport. So that's kind of the reason the Varsity Voices podcast came about, is say, hey, let's add some more coverage to high school sports, because it has dwindled out, and that shouldn't be the case in 2025.
I firmly agree. And I think you set up an opportunity to where you can get out of the big three. High school soccer in Mississippi from 1A private school to 1A to 7A is tremendous. Yep. Some of the best talent. I just happen to know a soccer guy, so if you ever get into that world, you just holler and I'll see if I can hook you up.
Absolutely.
So kind of to close everything out, like I said, I love getting to hear your voice on the Cowboy Maloney's commercials, and Malone Roofing, I believe, is some of the other ones that you've done. And so I have a feeling, knowing you, it's never, all right, we're good, let's stop. There's always got to be a plan for what's coming up down the road. This is a logical, natural fold question. 2025 wrapping up. We're going to start the next calendar year, 2026. What is on the docket for Jake Wimberly?
I think just to be a better version, and that's not trying to be catchy or cliche. Be a better version in 26 than what I was in 25. Our company was bought by a guy named Jeff Warshaw. Connoisseur Media is who we are now. So there's some learning curves there. I'm on some corporate boards with our company, just trying to make sure that we have everything in place, lever wise for businesses, and how we handle marketing. So I think it's just to continue to get the word out that, hey, we want an opportunity to invest in your business. We want you to invest in us, and really just continue to broker and build those relationships. Yeah, I'm still as hungry today in this business as I was 10 years ago. I've always said, once the hunger dies, then I'll do something different. But, you get to this point, for instance, in the football season, we've got this week, we'll handle state championships, and then it'll be over. I'm kind of glad when it gets over, just to kind of take a break. But the passion to do this, to call ball games, to be involved with people, to broker relationships marketing wise, all of that is still here. And we just want to be a better version in 26 than we were in 25.
Well, the best hair in Mississippi sports, Jake Wimberly, I greatly appreciate your time. Hopefully I get to see you down the road with some good sports calling, and then just some good friendship and relationship building. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Robert, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.